And here we are in chapter 14. Chapter 14 is about the 5-7 chord, or the dominant 7th chord, which is a major minor 7th chord. We've had a lot of practice in dealing with these, um, especially in analysis. However, we have not done any part writing with 5-7 chords, and that's what the focus of this chapter primarily is: part writing with 5-7 chords. Couple things to remember with 5-7 chords. Generally, we want to have the 7th of the chord move down by step, and we want to have the 3rd of the chord move up by step. Now, in a 5-7 chord, the root is the 5th scale degree of whatever key we're in. The 3rd is the leading tone of that scale. The 5th would be the supertonic, or the 2nd scale degree. And then the 7th, of course, is the 4th scale degree. So the 4 wants to resolve down to 3 because it's a tendency tone. 4th scale degree wants to resolve down to the 3rd scale degree because it's a tendency tone. Likewise, the leading tone wants to resolve up to tonic because it's also a tendency tone. In a 5-7 chord, we have 2 tendency tones. 4 moving to 3, which is the 7th of the chord, 4, moving to 3, and the 3rd of the chord, the leading tone, moving up to 1. I'm on page 228 in your textbook, and I'm going to show you an example of how to do this. We're looking at number 3. Now, if you look underneath this, you'll see a C in parentheses. That stands for complete, and an I in parentheses stands for incomplete. A complete triad, for example, will have root, 3rd, and 5th, whereas an incomplete will just have a root and a 3rd, the 5th being omitted. So I have to go from this chord to this chord. So here's how I do it. I look at my chord, which in this case is a 5-7 in the key of F minor. I name the chord C major minor 7. Then I spell out the chords C, E natural, G, and B flat. After I've spelled out the chord C major minor 7, I show that C is the root, E natural is the 3rd, which we also know is the leading tone. The 5th is G, and the 7th is B flat. Then I look at my notated chord, and I write an R next to the C, a 5 next to the G, a 3 next to the E natural, and a 7 next to the B flat. The reason I do this is because I can then figure out which pitch of this notated chord does what. So first thing, the 3rd scale degree generally is going to resolve up to tonic. In most cases, this is going to happen, especially if it's in an outside voice. So soprano voice, for example, the leading tone will resolve up to tonic most of the time, 99% of the time. Sometimes when it's an inner voice, it may be frustrated and move down a 3rd. We'll talk about that in a moment as well. The 7th of the chord generally resolves down by step. So 7 moves down by step, 3 generally moves up by step. I'm moving from a complete chord to an incomplete chord. So my incomplete 1 chord should only have a root and a 3rd, in this case an F and an A flat. So I'm going to start with a bass. I'm going to have my bass resolve up. The reason I've got my bass resolving up to the F here, which is hard to see, sorry, C resolves up to F because my 7th is on top, and 7 wants to resolve in the down direction. So I've got the bass and the soprano moving in opposite directions. So I resolve up to the F. My 7th here on top is going to resolve down to the A flat. My leading tone here is going to resolve up to the F. And then my 5th here, I'm going to have him or her move down to the F. So my completed chord is, I'll write it more clearly, F on both tenor and bass, alto on F, and soprano on A flat. So that's my answer. Let's look at another example, number 5. Number 5, I have a 5-7 going to 1, an incomplete 5-7, meaning I have root, 3rd, and 7th. I don't have the 5th in this example. Moving to a complete chord, which will be root, 3rd, and 5th. So first thing, let's name chords. In the key of A major, a 5-7 will be an E major minor 7 chord. In this case, it is an incomplete, so I have a root, which is my E, a third, which is my G sharp. I'm going to put the B in parentheses because it's not there, and a D natural in as the 7th. Now again, I'm going to make sure that I have this done right. So my E is the root, my G sharp is the third, my B is the 5th, which is not there in this example, and my D is the 7th. I do that so that I know that my 3rd resolves in one way and my 7th resolves in one way, and I've identified the pitches that are the 3rd and the 7th. That helps me a lot. So looking at my my chord here, my notated chord, E is the root, D is the 7th, E is the root, G sharp is the 3rd. The 3rd, of course, is the leading tone. Okay, so now I'm going to resolve this chord. I'm going to have my E go down in this example. The only reason is my 3rd is on top. My leading tone is on top. And which way does leading tone want to resolve? Up to tonic. So I'm going to let that happen there. Moves up to tonic. My D is the 7th, and D resolves which direction? Or the 7th resolves in which direction? Down, right? So leading tone resolves up in most cases. 7th resolves down in most cases. So I've got my leading tone, my 3rd resolving up. Here's my 7th in the tenor. It's going to resolve down to the C sharp. So I've got root, 3rd, and root. Root, 3rd, and root. Now this E here is the common tone between the two, isn't it? A, C sharp, and E. What do we generally do with common tones? We hold them in the same voice, so I'm going to leave the E there. So that's that example. I'll be back in a moment with more.